Fred Boat actually got disabled by Discord on the stage channels. I'm not really sure what the story is there anymore, but my research suggests to me that I'm not going to be able to blast 80s hair metal at people anymore. Go ahead and start us up.
Yeah, that's a bit of a shame. I know Fred Boat was always a little bit of a ritual, and it was kind of nice to get some intro music heading in. But let's kick off this call. Welcome, everyone, to this week's Provider Meetup. We're going to cover some things this week and kind of bounce back and forth between Ken and myself. Topics today include some of the Xminer update and what's going on over there. We'll discuss some of the internal developments, process planning that we have going on. And lastly, some network stuff as well. So these will be things and aspects that span ScPrime and Xminer and Relayer, all of those. So we'll actually start with that last one. For those of you who have been keeping a close eye on our Twitter and in our Discord channel, you might have already know a little bit about this, but we did apply to a new exchange this past week. This one is Gate.io. So what's kind of interesting and unique about Gate.io, I mean, many exchanges in the crypto space have some kind of unique flavors to them, or some of them are notable for different things. So Gate.io is one of the newer exchanges, at least in crypto terms, they don't go quite as far back as some others that have been around since like 2015, 2016, or even earlier. But what Gate.io has going for it and what makes it a little special or different from the others is that they have an enormous amount of coins listed. I think they have hundreds and hundreds of listings, which makes that kind of unique and special, as many exchanges might only have a couple dozen or even fewer. So hopefully that doesn't hurt our odds getting onto Gate.io, and hopefully for some of you as well that might have other crypto projects that you're interested in, hopefully Gate.io has some of those, and then you'll be able to kind of have one exchange that you're able to serve a number of communities for, which I think would be awesome to have for you guys. So we have filed that application this past week. As per usual with exchange applications, once that application is filed, we usually can't really talk about the status of them. So unfortunately, that's probably the most we can share about the status of that. But we have another exchange application coming up probably next week, or at least in the near future. We have Bittrex on deck as well, and that's an exchange that has had our attention for a little while. They seem to have pretty good support, at least across the US and international. And they are one of those exchanges that has been around for a long time. So we're excited at the prospect of getting on that exchange as well. And hopefully both of those exchanges will be able to serve you guys fairly well. What's also going on in the network side, for those of you who have StoPro console accounts, which a number of you would have created for the licensing process back when you had to register your DIY license, you may have recalled after you created your account that there's a little banner across the top of the screen that advertised a $50 coupon for use for storing data. So what that represented was if you downloaded the Relayer application, you would have $50 worth of credit in order to store data up on our network. So that would be enough for $5 terabytes for 1 month, 2.5 terabytes for 2 months. It's linear, but that storage coupon is now being retired. We've gotten all of the use out of it that we could have hoped to have, got a lot of good reception. But now I think we're at the point where, though there will be some kind of freebie coupon going forward, it'll be much smaller. And we're expecting to actually start accepting dollars and payment in return for our services, because we're at the point now where we're pretty confident in our abilities of our service, and we're excited to be booking our first revenues. I mean, there's a bit of a trope of kind of framing your first dollar bill or whatever in terms of booking your first revenues. So I don't know quite what the digital equivalent of that is for us, but I'm sure we'll figure something out. And I know everyone on the team is pretty excited at the prospect of that as well. I'll probably now bounce it back over to Ken, who will update some of you guys on some of the Xminer developments that have happened this past week. Take it away, Ken.
So we have a couple of things that we need to kind of cover. I'm going to do them, I think, a little. Let me kind of get the order straight in my mind. So I guess the first thing to say is that we put the Xminers up in the store. This is the closest thing to being quote unquote in stock. Every unit gets custom built and custom tested for a customer. We do a burn-in test at the end, which ultimately gets tied to a serial number, which actually is part of the process of how the units actually get provisioned. So it's doubtful that there will ever be a quote unquote in stock where it ships the next day, but I shouldn't say that because I don't know. It might turn into that, it might not. I'm not quite sure yet on how that looks. But for now, they are actually there, and the expectation is probably a week to 10 days for an order placed today to ship, which then brings up the immediate question, well, what about, the current ones that are in the hopper? Because those have been on a 6 to 8 week delay. And we shipped, I think, something like 20 or 30 systems today, which should ultimately bring it down to a number that is really manageable to ship over the next day or two. So Friday and or Monday, I think we're gated right now on some 16 terabyte drives, but those are supposed to be on the way in from Seagate and should be here today or tomorrow. So I feel pretty comfortable in saying that everything that is currently outstanding should probably end up with a tracking number no later than Monday, Tuesday latest, I guess. But new orders that are coming in right now probably can operate on a week to 10-day type understanding to get your um, completion and tracking number and so forth. And I think that'll hold through the end of the year. I don't really see anything happening that would change that unless we got some other weird thing that came up like we did in December. But I really don't see having another one of those this year. I think this year, with the bear market for everything else, probably we'll just be on a nice sort of comfortable sort of place. Let me pull up another quick document here before I get to the next piece. Have to find it here real quick. I thought I had it in front of me, but I don't. Okay, so we're about ready to launch a 1.1 version of the Examiner UI. We've done a lot of work to get to version 1, and 1.1 is a mix of features and cleanup. I think it's really going to be an exciting update for you guys. There's a couple things that we put in there that we realized really were sort of necessary. There's going to be a soft power off reboot switch built into the actual UI. That seems to be something that comes up from time to time on, asking the user to reboot the machine so that it can pick up a router change or an IP change or something along those lines. So that'll be in there. There will be a switch in there now to do a manual software update, whereas, we've been saying all along, just wait a few days or minutes or hours or whatever it is. So having a manual update in there. We've got something in there that's coming that's really pretty cool. I'll get to in just a quick second about it. The fixes that we're adding in there, we have a better action notification system. We've changed the way the tables and their lines are sort of laid out, so the tables are going to be a lot cleaner and easier to sort of read. The support page, we've cleaned up some bugs there. There was a crash of supervisor is down. We've fixed some things having to do with logging area. We've made it easier to identify new lines and logs. The word wrap was really challenging. We've changed some settings page stuff to make it cleaner. So overall, we've done an awful lot of fixing of small little wrinkle bugs that just needed to kind of be ironed out. And then Cam has also put in this new contract explorer, and maybe Henry can copy and paste those graphics that he posted in the product channel, our private product channel, into the events channel, because I think they're really cool. We're really starting to get stuff put together to show you what is actually going on with contracts, and we will continue to do this through the end of the year. By the time we get to the end of the year, I think it's going to be a really, really clean process of being able to understand what's going on with any individual contract and how much you can expect to earn from it, and really to have good, solid accounting for both your internal business operations and also for things like tax prep and stuff along those lines. But this is sort of the first step, getting this contract explorer in there and being able to show this. This goes hand in glove with the contract work we're doing on the back end. We're still deeply involved in this contract, remediation and understanding and development and testing and understanding why certain units lost data. We think that we've got it pretty well nailed down, but it doesn't mean that we won't still see one or two crop up. And if you're not on 166 or better on the daemon, there's a pretty good chance you're probably going to lose data. So just please understand that. Let me pull back here to my original thing. The full versions, the current situation on that is that we plan to have a full version out there for the Linux native side. We required a supervisor update before we could actually finalize that to get it out into a couple of alpha trialers' hands. We got the supervisor update today. I think probably tomorrow, James will be able to go through and give it a quick internal sort of, buff up and test and so forth. And so probably Monday will be when we first roll out the Linux native version to the first alpha people that want to give it a try and see how it works. And then barring any issues there, I think we'll be able to go ahead and put a release out on that. What that should do is that should open up the doorway for third-party manufacturers to go ahead and start launching their own EXA miners, which is something I've been really interested in getting to. Even though, understand, we know that it's going to cut into our own ability to fund our own development to some degree. We do want to do that because we do want to get an open source, ethos here that we still respect. So that's a big thing, getting that version out there and ready to go for them. If they're going to build on a Windows platform, it's still going to take some time because, as we said, we still need to get that supervisor rewrite done in a Windows native environment. It's going to take a bit more programming, probably going to take another 4 weeks, as we've discussed last call. But we will have a Linux version, native version, which is what we prefer, that should go out early next week, Monday, for the very first alpha people. I'll go ahead and send it back to Henry now.
Awesome work. Yeah, really exciting stuff happening on the Examiner side. I think that UI is looking really slick now. So awesome work to Cam on that, and I'm happy to have helped him test out some of those features. And I did post the screenshots in the events channel so everybody can see what the new contract browser will look like. It's pretty neat. So coming up, I guess speaking of kind of alpha testing that's going on, some of the efforts that we're kind of spearheading now, some of these are led by Bob, who we've spoken before, is really making an effort to formalize a lot of our processes and make sure that they're as polished as they can be. So some of these changes to our processes involve that we're now going to have a testnet moving forward. So this is something that historically, some networks kind of have testnets, some kind of use their main net before they get to product launch as essentially a testnet. So we were in that latter group. Historically, it didn't make a ton of sense considering the scale that we were at and the resources we had to have a very formalized testnet. But I think we are in that place now. So we are hoping to put together an alpha and a beta test group in order to contribute towards such a thing. So if you are a keener and you are really interested in potentially dedicating one of your providers, if you have several providers, toward an alpha or a beta test group, then consider posting that in the, probably the events discussion channel, maybe over the next day or two. And we'll consider reaching out to some of you guys, but this is a little still early in this process. So we'll probably touch on this again in another future call once we have a better idea of exactly what the ask is. But just keep in mind that that is a thing that's coming up. So maybe keep your ear to the floor for if you're really keen to maybe get onto some versions before they hit full release. That would be hopefully helpful to us. And if you're someone that really likes being on the very cutting edge of everything, then it can kind of be a win-win. Some other stuff to touch on. So kind of in line with some of those projects and pioneering that Bob is doing on our process formalization. That also spans our project roadmap moving forward. So over the last week or two, and in the coming weeks and months, we're having some dedicated planning sessions in order to work up a formal roadmap and a full roadmap that spans all of our different development efforts. Covers some kind of product development, although we'll talk about that a bit more later. And a big one is that it covers a lot of our infrastructure. So these planning sessions are happening now. Some of the effects of that is that internally we're having some meetings that are dedicated to just kind of skill and knowledge transferring. So an example of that might be potentially Jay, one of our IT guys, would host a meeting or a kind of a quick call where he goes over some of what his day-to-day tasks kind of look like, and specifically some things that if Jay isn't around necessarily for the day and something needs doing, then he won't be the only one that knows how to do that thing, because some of us will be trained and kind of sharing that knowledge on how to do that. So this may not be super interesting if you're just kind of a storage provider and just want to hear what the news is, but for someone that, well, I guess I'm on the team, but if you're someone that is interested in what the team is kind of up to and some of our processes, these are some important efforts that we're pushing on, and I think they're really going to pay off, because it can be difficult sometimes on a team that spans so many time zones. I mean, there's a lot of awesome benefits to doing that, but since we aren't in a physical office every day seeing each other, sometimes you do kind of need to go out of your way to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and you need to kind of formally plan some different lessons to make sure that you can show somebody how to do something, because it isn't just a matter of walking over to their cubicle and asking, hey, can you teach me how to do this thing? When all your work is over the internet and your team spans like 18-hour time zone differences or something. So anyway, we got Jay up here. Okay, that's exciting.
It's me. Ken invited me up. I'm not 100% sure on what he wants me to cover, but you're right that some of these things aren't super exciting for the community, but there's definitely benefits in the work we're doing that'll be obvious to the community as we go through. So one thing these planning sessions are centered around at the moment is our continuous integration and continuous delivery and deployment of our services. Not just our services like Grafana, but also our software like SPD and the Relayer app, and also our community-facing web stuff like the console, which you talked about before. One of the issues we've had to date is, like you say, quite often I've been the only one with the knowledge to deploy our stuff, and that was probably just an effect of the way we grew. So what we're moving to now is really putting the control of deployment of our services and software back into the hands of the developers. So that means when our front-end team have an update to the console, they can easily push into GitLab to their test environment, and they can get some acceptance from any of our stakeholders like Ken that their changes are good. Then they can push to their master branch and it will deploy it into production automatically. So it takes IT a little bit out of the equation. Some other benefits there, so we'll be able to push iterations and fixes of those things much quicker. We'll be able to roll them back much easier if there's any issues. And also, as part of the continuous deployment side of things, we're aiming mainly to deploy all of our stuff into Kubernetes. Currently, we have one small Kubernetes cluster hosted at Oracle, but the intention is to do a multi-cloud setup so that we can sustain the failure of one of these guys, which over the last couple of years has happened to all of them at least once or twice. So we're not avoiding AWS for any kind of political reasons or anything like that. We picked Oracle for different reasons, and we're not going to be shy about using AWS where we need to, because they definitely do some of that compute the best. So yeah, the intention really is to improve that delivery for the community so that so that we're not pushing things without testing. We're not waiting on other team members that aren't really relevant to software deployments. And it should also help with our software too, like SPD, Relayer app, and any other bits and pieces of stuff that eventually ends up in the hands of the community. So while the meetings are probably not super relevant to the community, the output of them definitely will be, and we should start feeling the effects of that in just probably a few weeks.
When I invited you up to the stage, you probably would have recognized this. I was talking the whole time, but I just hadn't turned my mic on. So it turned out good anyway because you came up and took people through it. I don't know if I totally agree with what you just said. I think this actually is really relevant to the community in some ways, and at least this community, the people that show up week in and week out for these calls and so forth, because I think keeping them in the loop of what we're doing on a development posture, I think is really helpful. And in this situation, I think it's really a big thing because we're going through this real challenge right now where we've identified that we've literally fire fought our whole way here for 3.5 years. We've been engaged in one long, constant fire suppression effort. And, it's worked and we've been able to deliver some pretty good stuff and we put out a lot of stuff actually, but it's really taken a toll on all of us and it's really beat us down in a lot of ways, in some ways. And I think that, you and the team transitioning us to this Kubernetes strategy is a real identification of our project growing up and identifying that it's time to recognize that we are building something that is going to go out there and compete with the big guys. What has the process been? You've been working with Ross, the consultant we brought in, who was an old Bob acquaintance. What has that process been like in learning Kubernetes and spinning it up, and what have been some of the aha moments that you've had during that process?
That's a pretty good question. I guess I'm still relatively new to Kubernetes, and I get the feeling that it doesn't really matter how much you learn about it. You're always going to be in that position. But we're in a pretty good position because we always built all of our stuff and services in Docker. So deploying to Kubernetes actually simplifies things in a way, while the system itself is quite a beast. All the hard work has already really been done. So the process for us is really just completing our GitLab CI for that final deployment stage of deploying it into a Kubernetes cluster rather than deploying Docker elsewhere. So, and the benefits are built into Kubernetes. We did go through a bit of a process where we tried to decide whether it was right for us. Everyone kind of does it because when you first look at it, it's overkill for almost everyone. But what you soon find out is that if you don't go with Kubernetes and you go with Docker Swarm or a slightly less complicated solution, is that you end up layering your own stuff on top to essentially emulate what you would have got with Kubernetes. So there's definitely a learning curve for me. But at the same time, it's actually relatively straightforward. So from Ross and I, we're really just working on the branching strategy when things get pushed into Kubernetes, and that's where all the benefits are for us. So it's really less. I mean, in the end, it's still just a Docker container running on someone else's server somewhere. So it's not technically too different to how things currently run. But the massive benefits we get just with the management and being able to spin up replicas and being able to change our, essentially just all of our services are defined by code. So we get a lot more change control. We get that kind of linting and testing built into the process. So yeah, we're really just working through it from top to bottom, making sure that, like you say, it is on a level of the same of the big guys. We don't have time now to be doing things in a half-assed way with the intention of tidying it up later. So we're just going all in basically, and we are doing it the same way as anyone else would do it. if they have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of customers. So that's what we're aiming for. We're not aiming for another 10x. We're aiming to be able to support a 1000x growth from here, pretty much. So the idea of getting a 10x isn't really relevant anymore. We need to be able to cater for much more than that.
Well, I wonder if you could, so Henry mentioned this idea about us driving a much more institutionalized or sort of set up testnet environment. But one of the things that we sort of have finally, after all this time, discovered is that one of the reasons why we've had a challenge with test netting and test culture, so to speak, across the board is just because of how rich our thing is and how deep the stack is and how many different components and so forth that it covers. I wonder if you have some thoughts there to expound a little bit on Henry's discussion of this whole testing environment, test netting, and sort of what we kind of hope for over the next several months in terms of testing.
Sure. So there's a few different parts of testing, and our developers like to point out that a difference in our project and many others is that we don't just take care of a blockchain, or we don't just take care of an application layer on top, but we actually have to test thoroughly everything from a blockchain, from mining blocks all the way to storing data, downloading data, and deleting data, which is quite different to the types of test nets that many other projects would have to do. So while we can spin up our test nets and we can automate providers spinning up or whatever we want, we can never really get that same sort of uniqueness out of a network that you have when you have thousands of individual people running their nodes, and the differences in types of hardware and internet connections and countries and routes, and the idea of actually making a really a mirror of our production network is almost impossible without putting in the same amount of effort into a second network, really. So we've got a few angles of testing. Some of it has to be done on the production network, but that's not testing as in potential for data loss or anything. That's just testing for how our production network is actually working, what we can get out of it, what kind of performance we can kind of expect. Those are the types of tests we can only do on our production network. We can never find out the capacity of our production network by using a test net, for example. So we have many angles to attach to approach this testing when we need to do blockchain stuff, or if we need to test what happens when blocks don't flow properly, or when transactions get stuck. Then we do need to set up a full test net with its own bootstrap servers and everything. For a lot of this testing, we don't need to do that. We can spin up separate Muse servers and join them to the production network. We can spin up real providers that we control, that we're not worried about data loss. So there's quite a project, I'd say, and that depending on what we want to test, we have to take it a bit of a different way. So we're focused on that at the moment, and building these components for our test net for suitable parts of whatever it is that we need to test at the time. So currently we have some test Muse servers, some test relayers. They're all operating on the production network, but we're getting very, very good information out of it, because we can do things like set contracts to only last 10 blocks. So we can check what happens with renewals after an hour, rather than waiting for a month and then seeing what happens. So it's a complicated thing. It's not as simple as just spinning up a test net. We really, really need providers in the real world to provide this data back to us. So yeah.
Cool, thanks. I totally am psyched up about this, because I think testing is really something that's been near and dear to my heart. And one of the things that I really think that's going to be interesting about our project is, and I keep kind of saying this, and I do totally believe it, that we really haven't proved whether our thing works yet, right? And nobody else has, by the way, either, in our space. we know it works, right? I mean, we know we can store data. We know we can split it and shard it and encrypt it and do all that sort of stuff. We know we can retrieve it. We know we can repair it. We know it works. But what we don't really know is, does it really work? And what I mean by that is, we don't really know if we're performant, comparable to the incumbents that are out there serving up 60 to 70% of the world's cloud storage. And that's really where the rubber hits the road. I mean, we could show up with some kind of disruptive capability, whether it's price or whether it's whatever. But at the end of the day, if our performance is so upside down to the stuff people are used to, we're not going anywhere. We're not getting anywhere off the ground. One of the things that I'm really interested in, at 4,000 providers, it'll be interesting to sort of build the infra for testing and to really try it out. But one of the things that I just really think we're going to get to, which is going to be fun, is when we get to 40,000 providers or more, and some big number, that we'll start to get really weird little unexpected insights about performance. And we might find that grouping different provider sets together that maybe was not really identifiable just on the surface, via like proximity or whatever, we might find some really weird combos of performance that we can't see, and that only come from sort of building up this testing matrix and really getting our culture driven in. So I'm really excited for that. So anyway, thanks for helping us out today, Jay. I think next week we'll invite my friend Pavel up here to do something similar, in kind of continuing to introduce you guys to the team and really exposing you to what we're doing behind the scenes and getting you up to speed. I'm going to turn it back over really for sort of the final. I think it's the final. Let me read through the things. Did you talk? You didn't talk about the roadmap framework yet, or you did, Henry?
Yeah, I talked about the roadmap framework in terms of kind of the grand infrastructure planning and some of the team stuff, but I didn't get into some of the product planning that we have.
Let me find that. Are you talking about the relay or roadmap stuff?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's me. All right. So yeah. So we have one more area to cover today, and then we'll go ahead and open up for questions. So, this is kind of an interesting area, and I don't know, how much of interest this will be to everybody. I think it might, but maybe not. I'm wrestling right now with a thing. We kind of got into this behind this sort of challenge, this sort of deluge of issues when people started losing some data on their individual providers. And a really important concept there is that, the customer never lost any data, right? Providers lost some data, no doubt about it. Some of you definitely saw some big vertical spikes down, but the customer never lost any data at all. We are the customer, by the way, because it's all our testing data, but we always had full access to download all of our data because of the way the network is set up. So I was never really too concerned about, any kind of visual saying that, we proved out that the network is not solid and at risk and blah, 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 because in the end, I think this was a really good example of showing that, look, you can lose a whole bunch of providers that don't renew contracts for one reason or another, and ultimately the data is still preserved and still available and so forth. We did lose individual data on providers and ultimately start to restore it, and then lost some more and continued to do it. But that was really, I think, a great exercise in helping us to understand a lot more about wrinkles and hardening up our contractor. And we're in that process now in the testnet. But part of what came out of that as I was wrestling with that, because it was kind of a distraction, right? It was permission to be distracted. And I hated it because, I was all ready to switch hats and put on my salesman hat and really kind of start supercharging people up to sell and buy storage on our network and blah, blah, blah. And, then out of the clear blue sky is like, not so fast. You got to deal with this. And, then now several weeks have gone sort of by and we're, in that process. And now as we wind that down, there's been some significant discussion internally about, well, how we kind of get out of firefighting mode and we get into more of a proactive mode and blah, blah, blah. So we're doing that channel, that direction, that strategy, and that's part of the testnet and all that stuff. Part of the other thing, though, that I've always had in my mind as we transition to sales is that it's not just going to be easy to go ahead and just put the salesman hat on and go out and sell a bunch of storage to people. Because we did have a couple of, really clear messages that showed up that sort of highlighted what kinds of issues we were going to run into. So I knew very early on that we were going to have to focus on storage partners first. We were going to have to get people that already had access to customers with data and had that trust that they could bring the folks over. So that's still the thing, and it's still something we're going to have to do. But what ended up happening is we put the relayer out there in the wide open for people to play with is, a couple of pretty, solid technologists grabbed a hold of it, got it running without too much problem, and were able to, sort of explore it. And they revealed and surfaced a few bugs for us. And a lot of those happened in private where they told us about them, or they, were just kind of like, this is going on, check it out. And we did, and, went forward. And then we had a few folks that, tried in earnest to kind of use the thing. And, this is not I'm not, crapping on these people because they're experts in other areas or whatever, and just volunteered to try out the relayer. But ultimately they fell in some holes, right? Because they didn't have enough ability to sort of grok the places we left up to the user to sort of understand. Maybe they have more of a Windows background or whatever. But in the end, what ended up happening is we had a number of other bugs surfaced. But we also had a number of things surface that showed us that, for the average user, might not quite be as customer friendly as it needs to be. So we've gone back and we've changed some of our roadmap around in order to make the relayer a bit more of a friendly install. But what that also did for me is it began to open up this sort of notion that we're probably going to have to ship relayers in a multiple, format. And so definitely it will always be an easy thing or a possible thing for you to spin up a VM, set up your own environment and run a relayer and then just move forward. But a lot of people aren't going to buy into that. A lot of people are going to say, that's just, we don't have expertise to learn that. We don't want to learn it, blah, blah, blah. Our partner says, we can do that, but maybe it would just be easier if you just gave us a piece of hardware and we could just plug it into our network with permissioning and, go forward like that. So I think one of the things you're going to see from us very quickly is we're going to launch this relayer hardware that we demonstrated at NAB. We will start it off, with a fairly basic plain Jane installation, but it'll be ready to go right out of the box. You'll just have to plug it into your network and sort of kind of get off the ground that way and start it. And I think, upscale, I think we'll get some customers for that that we wouldn't otherwise get. The other side of it is that we probably aren't going to just limit it to a big 1U rack mount with double Xeons and blah, blah, blah. For a busy network, that's probably what you're going to want. But there are probably going to be some mom and pops out there that can get by or would prefer to get by on something significantly smaller, because maybe all they're planning to do on our network is do some archival stuff, and they just maybe need to log in and upload stuff over, every week. They do some incrementals or whatever, or maybe it's just not a busy network. Maybe they just only have 5 or 8 people that are accessing the network all the time, and they need to hit a few applications. Maybe they do some file share work. Maybe they do some, cloud work. Maybe they do some archival with VM or whoever, Commvault, but it's just not busy. It's just a few people and maybe, dozens of terabytes or something like that. That kind of environment can probably get by with like an Intel NUC platform or a smaller version of a relayer that ends up being pretty cost affordable, not a big chunk of money and not really very difficult to integrate into your network. And what we can do on all of these hardware-based relayers is we can set up incentives the same way we're incentivizing the rebates on the examiners, right? Now, it's not quite the same because it's not like buy this and we'll rebate you your money because, in some ways that works, but in some ways it doesn't. What we need to do with the customer relayer purchasers is say, look, if you upload X amount of data, we will ultimately, over a period of time, credit you back on your purchase of this relayer. So what will likely happen is we will send a hardware piece to them on a contract where they don't have to pay for it. And then as they upload and store the agreed upon amount of data, they work off the actual costs of the relayer. If ultimately, for some reason, they don't make their commitment, yeah, they will then end up be like leasing. They will be on the hook to pay for the relayer. But I think for a lot of people that aren't going to want to put down a financial commitment on a relayer when they don't have to with AWS or they don't have to with whoever, to get around that sort of understanding, we will go ahead and incentivize them in a way that allows them to pay for that relayer. And quite likely, even after they factor in the costs that go on top to pay for the relayer as well as the stored data, they're still going to be in at a super large discount to GCP, Azure, AWS, and the rest. Maybe not Wasabi, but again, as I continue to say, we're not racing to the bottom. We just don't care to race to the bottom. May not be $10, but it may not be $4, right? So we just need to work through that. But so that's a thing that I've really kind of changed around on, is how we provision these relayers. And then ultimately, I think we are going to spin up a cluster, and that cluster will end up allowing mom and pops choose our relayer that we set up for them and run that with an extra charge. It won't be an enormous charge, but at the same time, we'll limit how big of a relayer we'll spin up for them, because we don't really want to be in that business. We just want to do it to make it convenient until they can set it up themselves, or they can get a partner to help them, or whatever. Or until we get to the place that we get stateless relayers, which allows all of you people to run relayers for people and so forth, which, could come within a year and a half to 2 years. So that's kind of a situation. In other words, a full-fledged strategy to roll relayers out, because the relayer is the one objection that everybody can bring to our thing that's different from everybody else's cloud storage network. Now, you get to this point and you say, well, if that's the case, aren't people just not going to come here? And I'm going to say, no, that's not right. I think once you sell this to people saying, look, the relayer is the very first step to true Web3. Filecoin can talk about Web3. All these people can talk about Web3, but if you go through and look at their network topology, you always end up at a significant choke point of centralization. And that's never going to end until there's a true, genuine distributed renter in play. And that's what the relayer is. The relayer is a distributed renter, which allows multiple people to all access the same cryptographically proofed metadata that identifies where a data set lives on a distributed network. This is a key piece of IP that people haven't yet understood that we have under our roof yet, right? Because at this point, we've been kind of like underselling and downplaying, been all about examiners, been all about, whatever. But the relayer is the thing. And we're the only ones that have it that works in spades right now. And this thing is very powerful. And it is the first step to Web3. The second step to Web3 is going to be rolling out contracting directly, and that part's going to be really easy for us to do. The third step to Web3 will be these stateless relayers, where we allow people to stand up relayers and run them like nodes, public nodes that anybody can log into permissionlessly and use. I don't know exactly what time frame that is, but I do think that we will get to it in not too far down the road in the future. But so getting a widespread capability of relayers out on the street, I think is really key. And so partners are a little frustrated with me right now because everything's kind of been held up. But I think you're going to really see the partners start to get supercharged over the next several weeks, because we're solving that contract problem, the data loss problem. We're ready to go ahead and start onboarding customers. As Henry said, we've expired the coupon. We're going to have a new coupon, but it's not going to be $50 worth. It's going to be a smaller number in line with what everybody else is sort of offering. And at the end of the day, we will start onboarding real storage for real money over the next several weeks and through the end of the year. I do want to close with one last thing, and then we'll go ahead and open it up for questions. I have mentioned what our strategy is here, and I understand that the SEC requires us to be kind of circumspect about this, but I don't think I'm going to be saying anything that's out of line. I'm just telling you what we're doing. I'm not asking you for anything. The deal is that, as we've said before, we bootstrapped this thing from the beginning. We focused on angels. They're angels that are mostly passive. If they haven't been passive, they've found their way into a passive role because there's too much in our thing for there to be too many cooks. But at the end of the day, we've made it to where we've made it. And we're focused now on starting to actually show that the thing can work and sell storage and to get actual, money to storage on our network. Well, that's not the end of it by any stretch. I mean, obviously that's sort of like the first stare on being for real. And what we expect to have happen at the end of this, say, next 5 months by December 31st is I've never gone out and actually talked to any real serious institutional investors. I've talked to a couple of people who showed up in our Discord and presented themselves as serious investors. It turned out in almost every case, those people turned out to not be serious investors, that they wanted something that we just wouldn't deliver, which is essentially a derisory valuation and essentially giving them a free pass into equity into our thing. And I just turned them down. We just said, no, we'll just bootstrap and we'll just keep going forward. But I did learn a lot about how I'm going to have to position things going forward. And I think having a working network is going to make a lot of that really short work. I think we're going to be able to go out to Silicon Valley. I think we're going to be able to go to very large institutions. And I think we're going to be able to say very clearly, we got something almost nobody else has, by the way. We got a thing that does what we say it does, right? It fits our white paper. It goes all the way. But guess what? It's not just a fleshed out idea that still has a lot of tentacles of development before it can be called real. It's actually real and working, and the thing can be used by real customers right now. I think once I present that with a dog and pony and a slide deck and show them the real network, I think we're not going to have any problem at all attracting the kind of financial capital that we really need. In fact, I think what's going to happen is we'll probably find ourselves in some sort of weird bidding war when people really realize what we have. And understand that one of the reasons people don't realize what we have is because we're only on South Exchange primarily. We're on, Trade Ogre, and I think we're still on Probit, to be honest. But the situation is that, as I said, institutions and VCs and people like that are not on South Exchange. Retail guys are. People that believe in this thing are. People that are, storage providers are. They're fine with using South Exchange. Why not? But the people that can actually lift the coin to price discovery are not. And they're not going to be. They're not going to come over here and join up on South Exchange. But I think and so they don't know about it, right? When I go out and ping them in Twitter or whatever, they kind of look at me and like, who the fuck are you? You just leave me alone, quit responding to me. Because they don't know. They don't know what we've done. They haven't heard the pitch. And I think when we get out and give them the pitch and show them the thing working, that we are going to find a bunch of people say, holy shit, where have you guys been? And wait a second, you're telling me you're the second largest network in crypto right now? And you actually have real storage? When they see all this, they're going to say, why aren't you on a bigger exchange? And I'm going to explain to them exactly the situation. So we couldn't afford it. We've never been able to really afford it. We did spend a little bit of money to be on Crypto Bridge. We got screwed. We did spend a little bit of money to be on Whitebit. We got jammed up because we didn't provide a serious amount of market making. Would have been involved us spending a bunch of money absorbing the miner cells. We got money invested in Probet. We got screwed there because they turned around and walked away and looked like they were going to steal a whole bunch of community money. They did for about a year and 2 months till the markets melted down and the Korean regulators started sniffing around all things. And that's when she showed back up and said, hey, I want to give your guys their money back. How do I do it? And then we finally got everybody their money back. But all those we spent a little bit of money on, and ultimately we didn't get anywhere. They just were bad ideas. We know kind of what we need to do. We need to get into a top 5 exchange. That's just the bottom line of it. We have to get into a top 5 exchange. And the only way to get there is to have a lot of volume and to have a lot of sort of market making budget, to have the ability to really validate ourselves there. I can only do that once I make a cap raise. Once I get $5-10 million into the company, to where we could dedicate some 500,000 to $1 million towards the exchange operations, can we actually stake a claim to being on Binance? It just sucks. It's where we are and it's what it is, but it is something that we have to do in order to make that work. There's a couple of those things, by the way. You know, when the cap raise comes in, we have a number of things that we really want to do. And so I'm going to close with this last one, which will be a little bit of a surprise, but probably shouldn't be. Well, actually, I got 2 things, and they're both sort of surprises. So the first one, though, is that building this foundational layer of, object storage is really, tier 1 of what we wanted to do. And we can put a pin in it and say we completed our vision mission to get to that level. And we could go on and make good mom and pop type money for a long time. This could be a great family business for a long time, generating and shedding off a lot of money. But at the end of the day, that's not really the vision here. The vision is to take this thing all the way. And what that means is you have to build that first S3 layer, which we're now in a place to be able to stamp it good. And once we test it completely, we'll be able to say that we did it. But the next step is actually even more interesting, and that's the step of adding compute on top of it. And compute is just one of many overlays that we can start to plug in. Data lakes, databases, all kind of block storage. There's a whole bunch of different things that we can do up the ladder, content distribution networks that AWS has. And all you need to do is go look at all the AWS products, and you'll see what we can build out on our thing now that we have this foundation. But compute is really the next big one, because compute really starts to open the doors to all the other things. And typically in crypto, what would happen is people would go out and partner up with some other project, maybe like, the Dockerized crypto dudes, Akashic, I guess they're called, or some of the other people that are trying to do this sort of work, maybe like Live Peer for live streaming. But frankly, I don't think we're going to do that. I think we're going to continue to build our thing internally, because every time we do it ourselves and not partner with other people in crypto, we ultimately build in the ability to take care of everybody that's in our project. So all the way from you guys, through developers, through partners, through everything, we keep it all to ourselves, right? We're building this IP. We're doing all this stuff. There's value, I think, in sharing and having open protocols and having other people work with you and so forth. But I just think what we're building is so important and so valuable and so definitely different from the rest of crypto. These people didn't give a fuck about us the last 3 years. Why in the hell do I want to go out and give them a big opening and say, hey, now come in and exploit our thing for everything it's worth? Screw that. We'll do it ourselves. We'll build out compute. And when we get compute on this thing, then things are going to really get interesting, because we are going to have probably what amounts to the only real working thing in crypto. I hate to say it that way. Look, DeFi does work, and if you're trying to build loans or you're trying to build all that, others trying to reinvent money, yeah, okay. I'm not going to argue that those aren't real products. But ours is one of the only real things that does something that, doesn't require crypto, but can benefit very seriously from it. And it's one of the few things I think that can really do that. So that's the thing. The other thing I want to say just real quickly, and I'm just going to leave with this, is that some of you probably knew this was coming anyway, but so it probably won't be that big of a surprise. On the basic DIY licenses, we are going to rebate 100% of them. If you bought one 2 weeks ago, or you bought one yesterday, or if you buy one another week from now, we will continue to include you in the rebates, just like we did for the people with the deadlines. We tried to use the deadlines to get as many people to understand what was going on. But now we're at a place where we're essentially launching. And so that will be the case. The basic DIY $99 thing will be completely rebated for everybody. The full version, on the other hand, which makes you an Examiner, is what it is. If you got in and got under a rebate, congrats. But at this point, to get that now, you're going to have to pay the money for that. But the $99 guys that, didn't know if they were going to stick around, they get a chance now to come on board and stick in with the project and be involved. So that's sort of the final announcement. Open it up for questions. Doesn't seem like there are any, so we'll probably table the meeting and run away. No, I knew it. Hang on. They change the way they change stuff all the time, so I have to figure out how to do this now because they allow requests from everyone. Okay, yeah, okay, so that's a new switch I have to throw now. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sweet. Wondering if you've worked out the details of the upgrade from the basic license to the full license.
Well, the first step of that is getting the full license version out there and operational. And so the answer is no, because we haven't actually finished that part. Getting the Linux version out there, though, will be that step that allows us to turn around and then say, yeah, here's the upgrade price and here's what it's going to take and blah, blah, blah. But we got to get past next week and we've got to, validate that we have this thing working and figure out what kind of holes people fall into and all of that. So we're close, but not quite there yet.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I don't know if I like this new speaking buttons because it doesn't allow me to line people up in a queue. Go ahead.
Hey, Faust. So just a stupid question on the compute stuff because that really excites me. What do you have any sort of I guess theory around how you're gonna do that? Like, is it gonna be still based on a Linux kernel, or is there something that you think take back and do more with?
I don't presume right now to be able to answer any questions around that. At this point, all I'm really going to say is that we know that is the next milestone that we need to tackle. And I think we'll tackle it with the same level of competence and capability that we had tackled everything else. We've done no homework yet at all. We've done no background work at all. And our developers are hearing it for the first time, just like you are. So sorry,
Cool.
but I can't really answer the question
No,
to any level.
I had figured that, right? So I know there'll be some thought, I guess, into whether or not it's even on the same nodes as the the storage nodes, right? It could be something totally separate, right?
I don't think it can be. I mean, I think it can be. Does it work? Yes. I mean, Jay showed an Examiner running a relayer, right? And it does work. You can run a relayer on an Examiner and have the Examiner working operationally. But very low processor and very low memory is never a recipe for a relayer. And it's definitely not going to be a strong recipe for compute, where we typically are going to want to provision lots of Xeon type level processors. So yeah, I think it's going to be a whole new node. I think it's going to be new nodes. And I think you guys are going to, again, be the first ones to dive in and be able to offer them. And by then we will have shown you the money on the storage side. So I think ultimately, it's just going to keep getting better and better and better.
Yeah, super exciting. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else? Okay, let me look through here. There's one. Yeah, I hate this. It should show them to all in a list, but it doesn't. Go ahead.
Hi. So I represent a company that basically specializes in IoT devices, and we have been very much interested in utilizing ScPrime as one of the decentralized storage technologies that we could offer through our platform. One of the limitations that I have came across and in our testing has been the privacy of the wallet itself. The deployment process that we have been utilizing has been specific to using Docker images, which are pre-built by SCP. As such, using those Docker images has been a breeze. They work perfect. However, still leaves us with a huge question of the seeds that are generated by those wallets. And if you guys are very much, or if you guys are interested in reaching out to third-party providers, then I would definitely also suggest for you to reconsider, or at least consider modifications to the wallet, or at least a secondary version of the internal wallet, such that the privacy part of the wallet can be separated from the runtime of the wallet itself.
We know we're going to be doing significant work on the whole contract. So right now, the way things work on contracts is there's only 3 transactions printed to the blockchain. There's the opening transaction of the smart contract. There is a closing revision transaction, and then there's a final storage proof and ultimately resolution or non-resolution of the contract. And then what ends up happening in the middle is there's these 2 outputs on both sides of the contract, and money just flows in these what are called little micro transactions from one to the other, but there's no visible footprint other than looking at your wallet, seeing coins leave. And it's that essentially forces us to leave the wallet unlocked and open, because it has to be able to continue to process that money going forward. But the deal is that we are getting into the process now of reevaluating that whole strategy of how that works in the contracting. It's likely we're going to make some infrastructure or structural changes to our smart contracting over the next several months, and it's quite possible that that disintermediation of the privacy layer, like you're talking about, could be included in that. In fact, the other part that I'm talking about with another developer, who was one of the guys who helped originally in the beginning fork the project, is that he's looking to take the web wallet that he's developed and actually pushing consensus out to a remote node, but then keeping all the privacy stuff, closed so that we can do an app on a phone. And then ultimately, it's quite possible that he then ends up becoming that developer who starts to focus in on what you're talking about. So yes, it's on our radar. I don't have any specific road mapping of it, but it is definitely something that is part and parcel of something that's very important that we will be focusing on over the next 5 to 6 months.
Right. I have one more small question, if you don't mind. So what are the possibilities of perhaps SCP maybe looking into or considering to release vendor firmwares or maybe binaries that may be more so friendly for third-party vendors versus what DIYers, so maybe maintain a few different branches? I know that's more cumbersome. However, it would help you guys to offer some more manufacturer or third-party integrator-specific modifications. Like one of the things that I worked on last week and kind of failed in it too was taking all of the basic configuration for a node, like your collateral, your upload, download, price. And what I ended up doing was adding it to a JSON file, and then I was reading that file sequentially to supply those values. However, that venture failed because I wasn't able to unlock the wallet using the same method. That was a failing venture for me. However, it did teach me some valuable lessons in terms of how I would see a manufacturer utilize something like this by giving the end user a little bit more extra control by, let's say, leaving some kind of a configuration file in the storage disk itself, which the user would then have access to, and they can modify those, and which would allow for the server to just basically pull those configurations from a static location and be able to apply them on the runtime. I mean, and this is just all a suggestion, if I may.
I don't think we're too far off on the notion. I think we can definitely tailor some of the work we're already doing to accomplish that, and I think we will. We have we have 3 specific manufacturers right now who have approached us to build examiners, and we have a full licensed version for DIYers that's going out to start with next week. So we've already sort of built the stack to allow people to sort of implement this thing in a fully featured kind of a way. Ultimately, what will end up happening on that is that we will open source parts of it we will keep closed, but ultimately at the end of the day, doing the kind of stuff that you're talking about to incentivize and to bring on more people and to make it easier. What I'm actually thinking about, so like the 3 manufacturers that are currently building are building their own platforms, right? They're coming up with their own architectures, they're coming up with their own ideas about what they want to represent, but there's a whole panoply of NAS devices out there, QNAP and Synology and blah blah blah, that we could build app layers that work on their things more directly than we currently do, which is all on manually provisioning Docker containers. So yeah, I mean, I think we're aligned with that, and I think the work we're already doing is going to position us to be able to do a lot of that stuff. I think we just need more feedback on what you guys are looking for, and we need to determine how it fits into what we've been able to build so far, and what we need to build it out further.
Definitely. Thank you so much for this answer. And as I said, we are very much targeting microarchitectures. So I am pushing for more nodes with maybe smaller storage rather than more storage with less and less nodes. So this would definitely be something I'll be looking forward to and would like to be a part of. Thank you so much.
Well, and the other thing I would say to you directly is I changed your role to storage partner. You should essentially come and talk to us a little bit about your use case and your need, because if you actually do have the ability to onboard some storage to get started on a trial basis and to sort of support some significant storage on the network right out of the chute, we currently have subsidization set up for you to do that. So we can make it very cost affordable to really get in there and try some stuff out and to see how it all works. If you can make, some kinds of commitments along the way, ultimately, I think we can make it so financially, palatable that you just can't not accept the offer. So
Definitely.
stay tuned with the partner channel is what I would say to you.
I definitely will. Thank you so much.
Okay. Let me look through the list, because now there's no list. I have to look through every single provider or every single person in the theater to see if their hand is raised, because I don't have what I used to have. Looks like there's no more hands raised. You see any hands, Henry?
No, I think we're all clear.
All right. Okay, guys, looks like we made it again. Appreciate everybody for showing up. We're going to keep distributing the information the way we have been. We're going to keep introducing you to our developers. We're going to keep providing as much transparency as we possibly can. We're going to keep moving this thing forward. Things are getting, challenging, obviously, but at the same time, we are getting across this finish line. It just so happens that the finish line is turning out to be a really wide line. And as we kind of get over it, you'll start to see the things happen where storage is showing up on the network, and you will be rewarded. So I appreciate everybody showing up today again, and thanks a lot for coming.